For 70 years, the rules of the royal jewelry box seemed carved in stone. We knew exactly which tiara belonged to whom, and those lines were almost never crossed. But have you noticed what's happening lately? First, it looked like a happy accident. Then, a coincidence. But after the stunning events of 2025, seeing the Princess of Wales in a ruby treasure strictly reserved for queens, and Queen Camilla wearing emeralds we thought belonged to the younger generation, there is no doubt left. The vaults have been thrown wide open, the old rulebook is gone, and frankly, it is the most exciting shift we have seen in generations. Let's talk about the quiet revolution of Queen Camilla. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. To understand just how revolutionary Queen Camilla's recent choices have been, we first need to appreciate the world that came before. For 70 years, the jewelry wardrobe of the British royal family was defined by one word: stability. Under Queen Elizabeth II, the contents of the vault were not treated as a communal dressing-up box, but rather as a carefully regulated hierarchy. There was a sense of permanence, almost like a uniform. Once a piece was assigned to a royal lady, it effectively became hers, whether for a specific chapter of her life or for decades to come. We saw this clearly with the long-term loan system. A perfect example is the Cartier Halo Tiara. It wasn't a piece that bounced around from person to person. Purchased by King George VI in 1936 and given to Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, it was eventually gifted to Princess Elizabeth for her 18th birthday in 1944. But the future queen never wore it publicly. Instead, it began a very specific journey. It was loaned to her sister, Princess Margaret, who wore it frequently as a young woman. Then, as Margaret moved on to grander pieces, the halo passed to the next generation. Princess Anne wore it as her first tiara in the late 1960s. And once Anne graduated to larger diadems, the halo went back into the dark, unseen for decades, until it re-emerged for Catherine Middleton on her wedding day in 2011. There was a clear, orderly line of succession. No confusion, no swapping. This sense of one lady, one look was even more pronounced with what we might call lifetime loans. Think of the Art Deco emerald choker. Once it was placed around the neck of the Princess of Wales in 1981, it became inextricably linked to Diana. She wore it as a choker, and famously as a bandeau across her forehead in Australia, making it her signature. It would have been unimaginable to see another royal lady wearing Diana's emeralds while she was still using them. However, this stability came with a certain rigidity. There was very little flexibility, even for the highest-ranking women in the family. Consider the experience of Diana, Princess of Wales. We often associate her with the pearl lover's knot tiara, that heavy, romantic piece originally commissioned by Queen Mary. But according to reports, this relationship wasn't entirely a love affair. Diana famously found the tiara difficult to wear. It was heavy, and the swinging pearls made it noisy, reportedly giving her headaches. Yet, despite being the future queen consort, she wasn't given the keys to the vault to simply pick something lighter or more comfortable. The late queen's approach was disciplined. Diana had the lover's knot on loan, and she had her own family's Spencer tiara. Those were her options. The idea of freely rotating through the collection to suit one's mood or comfort level simply wasn't the Elizabethan way. And interestingly, this specific tiara seems to have carried that sense of continuity into the present day. Since 2015, the lover's knot has effectively become Catherine's signature tiara. Even though we are just beginning to witness a new era of sharing and swapping, something we will discuss in more detail shortly, personally, I find it quite difficult to imagine seeing this particular tiara on anyone else. But I am curious to know what you think. Will the lover's knot remain tacitly reserved for Catherine? Or could we perhaps see it on someone else this very year, maybe on Sophie, or even on Queen Camilla herself? The same logic applies today to the Princess of Wales and the diamond frame earrings. These elegant floral cluster earrings, with their 4 graduating diamonds, were worn by the late Queen in 2012 and 2013. But since Kate first wore them in 2016, they have effectively become hers. We haven't seen them on anyone else, creating a sense of exclusivity that defines the British style. This strict siloing of jewelry extended to Camilla herself before her accession. When she was the Duchess of Cornwall, her royal rotation was incredibly limited. She was essentially granted a select trio of diadems: the Grand Greville Honeycomb, the massive Delhi Durbar, which she wore only once, and the Tech Crescent tiara. And here is a fascinating detail that speaks volumes about that era. The Tech Crescent was reportedly at her disposal, yet she never wore it publicly. Not once. She stuck to the Greville Honeycomb, creating a consistent, predictable image. It was a system that valued branding over variety. Perhaps the most unbreakable rule of Queen Elizabeth II's reign was that she rarely, if ever, shared the pieces she was currently wearing. If a jewel was in the Queen's active rotation, it was off-limits to everyone else. There were only rare exceptions to this. We saw this, for example, with certain necklaces, such as the Diamond King Khalid or King Faisal necklaces, which were occasionally loaned to Diana or Sophie while the Queen still used them. But there was one moment that caused quite a stir among royal watchers. It involved the Edinburgh wedding bracelet. This isn't just any piece of jewelry, it is deeply sentimental. Prince Philip designed it himself using diamonds from a tiara that belonged to his mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg, diamonds that trace back to the Romanovs. The Queen wore this geometric, Art Deco-style bracelet regularly for 70 years. It was personal. So, when the Duchess of Cambridge appeared wearing it at a state banquet in 2015, and later at the BAFTAs, it was a sensation. It was a rare breach of the protocol that said, "The Queen's jewels are for the Queen." It signaled immense favor, but it was the exception that proved the rule. This British approach stands in stark contrast to our neighbors on the continent. If you look at the Dutch or Swedish royal families, they operate on a completely different philosophy. In the Netherlands, for example, there is the magnificent Stuart tiara, and in Sweden, the Braganza. These are reserved strictly for the Queen. But everything else? It is essentially a communal pool. You might see a diamond tiara on the Queen one day, her daughter the next, and her daughter-in-law the week after. It is a game of musical chairs with diamonds. But in Britain, until very recently, even the smaller tiaras felt privatized, locked away in individual silos. It created an image of immutability, where every diamond had its place, and every royal lady had her designated uniform. It was grand, it was stable, and, let's be honest, it was perhaps just a little bit static. With a new king and queen, the doors to the vault have swung wide open. We are witnessing two monumental shifts at once, a move toward what we might call the European style of rotation, more on that in a moment, and something even more thrilling, a deep dive into the archives. Queen Camilla isn't simply reaching for the familiar, glittering staples we've seen 1,000 times. She is acting like a curator, or perhaps an archaeologist, digging into the furthest corners of the collection to uncover treasures that have been sleeping for generations. She is finding pieces that history had almost forgotten. Take, for instance, the exquisite diamond watch brooch she debuted at Royal Ascot in June 2025. This wasn't just another diamond pin. It was a revelation. Shaped like a diamond bow suspending a floral pendant, it hides a secret: a functional watch face. It was a wedding gift to the future Queen Mary back in 1893 from Alice de Rothschild. We hadn't seen it in public since 1936, when the Queen Mother wore it while still the Duchess of York. For nearly 90 years, it lay in the dark. The late Queen Elizabeth II favored classic, purely decorative brooches. But Camilla has a different eye. By choosing this piece, she revived a forgotten genre of functional jewelry, showing a distinct taste for vintage charm and intricate mechanics. It's a choice that says she values the story as much as the sparkle. This appreciation for the archives extends to pieces with much quieter personal histories. Consider the intriguing brooch Queen Camilla debuted on Christmas morning in 2023. At the time, the palace simply referred to it as the Raspberry Pip brooch, a whimsical name likely inspired by the shape and color of its stones. But the jewel is actually a historic cross, and its origins take us back to the king's maternal ancestors. It has been identified as a piece belonging to the Countess of Strathmore, the Queen Mother's own mother. She received it as a wedding gift way back in 1881. For years, the family believed the yellow stones were diamonds. The Countess even described it as her yellow diamond cross in her will when she bequeathed it to her daughter in 1938. However, jewelers who have examined the piece more recently confirmed that the stones are actually yellow topazes. Remarkably, neither the Queen Mother nor Queen Elizabeth II were ever photographed wearing it. It remained hidden for over 80 years until Camilla brought it back to Sandringham, and it wasn't a one-time appearance. Since that debut, it has clearly become a favorite in her rotation. It is a prime example of how she is integrating these forgotten heirlooms into her regular working wardrobe. But perhaps the most spectacular resurrection wasn't worn by Camilla herself, but gifted by her to the Princess of Wales. I am talking, of course, about the Strathmore Rose Tiara. For decades, this floral masterpiece was the subject of worried rumors. Had it been broken up? Was it too fragile to wear? After all, it hadn't been seen since the 1930s, 90 years of silence. It was a wedding gift to the Queen Mother from her father, the Earl of Strathmore, and she loved to wear it low on her forehead in the flapper style of the 1920s. When Catherine stepped out in it for the South Korean state banquet in 2023, it was a sensation. The roses hadn't withered, they had simply been waiting. Its return was a triumphant signal of the new reign's philosophy. The archives are open, the dust covers are off, and nothing is too old or too forgotten to shine again. The surprises didn't end there. In March 2024, Queen Camilla stepped out at the Commonwealth Day service wearing something truly breathtaking: a massive aquamarine brooch set in an upside-down diamond heart. It was a piece of jewelry that commanded attention, but it also sparked a bit of a mystery. Initially, the palace simply stated that it was from the collection of the late Queen Elizabeth II. But there was a problem. No one could find a single photograph of Elizabeth II wearing it. It took the eagle eye of a Norwegian historian who had access to the royal archives to solve the puzzle. This wasn't just a Queen Elizabeth piece, it was actually a lost treasure belonging to Queen Alexandra, likely a gift for her 60th birthday way back in 1904. By choosing this brooch, Camilla wasn't just reaching back one generation, she was reviving a legacy that stretched back 4 generations, bringing a piece of history out of the shadows for the first time in over a century. But perhaps the most dramatic reveal happened at the diplomatic reception in December 2023. Queen Camilla pinned a monumental diamond stomacher to her gown, a cascade of diamonds with intricate tassels that looked like something straight out of the Belle Epoque. The palace confirmed it belonged to the Queen Mother, but here is the fascinating part. There is not a single known photograph of her ever wearing it. Experts suspect this dazzling piece might be part of the legendary Greville bequest, that treasure trove of jewels left to the Queen Mother by the society hostess Margaret Greville in 1942. If so, this stomacher may have been sitting in a vault, unworn and unseen, for over 80 years. To bring out such a significant, heavy piece of history for a modern diplomatic event was a bold statement. It showed us that under Camilla's watch, nothing is too old, too large, or too forgotten to be worn. And sometimes, the discoveries are smaller, but just as poignant. During her very first state visit as queen to Germany in March 2023, Camilla wore a delicate turquoise and diamond flower brooch. It was a modest piece compared to the stomacher, but its history is deeply sentimental. It was originally a confirmation gift given to the future Queen Elizabeth II by her grandmother, Queen Mary, in 1942. Think about that date, 1942. It was the height of the war. A young Princess Elizabeth received this token of love for her confirmation. Yet surprisingly, she was never once photographed wearing it publicly during her record-breaking reign. For Camilla to find this quiet, unworn treasure and wear it on such a high-profile international stage proves one thing. The inventory she is conducting isn't just a quick glance. It is a total, thoughtful review of every box in the royal attic. She is finding the stories that have been waiting to be told. If finding lost treasures requires the patience of an archaeologist, wearing them takes the eye of a stylist. And in 2025, Queen Camilla proved she has both. While the earlier discoveries were about reviving the past, her recent emerald choices have been about redefining it. She has shown a distinct fearlessness when it comes to difficult stones, and, more importantly, a willingness to adapt history to suit herself. The first emerald shockwave came at the diplomatic reception in November 2025. When the doors of Windsor Castle opened, Queen Camilla appeared wearing something truly unexpected: the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara. Until that moment, the public associated this masterpiece almost exclusively with Princess Eugenie, who famously wore it for her wedding in 2018. While the tiara has always remained in the central royal vault, it is highly unusual for a queen to wear a piece so recently branded by a junior royal's wedding. Typically, once a tiara is lent to a granddaughter, it becomes part of her visual signature, and the monarch sticks to pieces with a longer, more regal history. But Camilla flipped the script. By placing this 93-carat emerald on her own head, she reminded everyone that this isn't just Eugenie's wedding tiara, it is a Greville masterpiece of queenly status. She effectively reset the hierarchy of the piece, showing that in the new era, a spectacular jewel can serve both a young bride and the queen herself. But if wearing the tiara was a statement of status, her next move was a statement of style. I am talking about the second Greville emerald necklace. This is a piece with a complicated history. It was part of that legendary bequest from Mrs. Greville in 1942, but unlike other items, it sat largely unworn. The late Queen Elizabeth II wore it only once in public, very late in her reign. It was a heavy, imposing piece, laden with square emeralds and cabochon drops, a design that felt perhaps a little too weighty for modern tastes. Camilla, however, didn't just take it out of the box, she adapted it. When she debuted it at the German state banquet in 2025, keen-eyed observers noticed something different. The necklace was shorter, lighter. She had seemingly removed the heavy pendant drops to create a more wearable, balanced silhouette. This subtle adjustment highlights a fascinating shift in perspective. While the late queen tended to wear these grand parures exactly as they were designed, preserving their imposing historical silhouette, Camilla takes a more pragmatic approach. By unhooking the heavy drops, she didn't permanently alter the piece, she simply styled it to suit a modern eye. She treats the collection not just as a museum exhibit to be guarded, but as a functional wardrobe to be used. And frankly, seeing these emeralds breathe again, in a form that feels fresh and wearable, is far better than letting them slumber in the dark for another century. But while these deep dives into the archive are fascinating, they represent only half of the revolution. The other half is happening right on the surface, with the pieces we already know. For decades, we operated under the assumption that once a tiara was assigned to a royal lady, it stayed with her. But Queen Camilla seems to be dismantling this idea, moving the British monarchy closer to the European model seen in Sweden or the Netherlands. In those courts, the jewel vault is essentially a communal library. Anyone can borrow almost anything. And now, for the first time, we are seeing that same fluidity in London. The first clear signal that the old rules were changing came courtesy of the lotus flower tiara. This delicate Egyptian-style piece has a distinct history. Originally created by the Queen Mother from a wedding necklace in the 1920s, it was handed down to Princess Margaret in 1959, just before her marriage. For decades, it was Margaret's piece. After Margaret passed away, many jewel historians feared the tiara had been sold or locked away in her children's private collection. So, it was a sensation when the late Queen Elizabeth II loaned it to the then Duchess of Cambridge in 2013. Seeing Catherine bring this lost tiara back to life was a major moment, and over the years, it seemed to become her designated alternative to the lover's knot. When Catherine wore it again for the diplomatic reception in December 2022, already in her new role as Princess of Wales, it felt like a confirmation of the status quo. Even with a new king and queen on the throne, it appeared that the old lifetime loan arrangement was still firmly in place. What the late queen had lent to Catherine remained exclusively with Catherine. That is why the events of June 2024 caused such a stir. When the Duchess of Edinburgh, Sophie, arrived at the Japanese state banquet, she wasn't wearing her usual aquamarines. She was wearing the lotus flower. It was a genuine surprise to see a tiara so strongly linked to the future queen suddenly appearing on a royal aunt. It sparked immediate conversation. Had the rules changed? And there was a tiny, technical detail that proved just how spontaneous this loan was. The base of the tiara on Sophie's head was wrapped in dark brown velvet, designed to blend into Catherine's brunette hair, which stood out starkly against Sophie's blonde locks. It was as if they had simply plucked it from the princess's shelf and handed it to the Duchess, creating a moment of pure, communal sharing. This spirit of exchange goes both ways, and it involves even grander treasures. We saw this clearly back in 2023, when the Princess of Wales appeared in the official coronation portraits wearing a piece of immense dynastic weight: the George VI festoon necklace. This isn't just a pretty accessory, it is a monumental three-row diamond masterpiece commissioned by King George VI in 1950 using 105 heirloom diamonds. It was a favorite of Queen Elizabeth II for her biggest state occasions. Seeing Catherine wear it for the coronation portraits was a significant statement of her elevated status. But then, in June 2024, at that same Japanese state banquet where Sophie wore the lotus flower, Queen Camilla stepped out wearing the very same festoon necklace. It was a subtle but powerful swap. The Princess of Wales wore it for a historic portrait. The Queen wore it for a gala. In the past, such a piece might have been guarded as the exclusive property of the monarch. Now, it flows freely between the two most senior women in the family. It symbolizes not rivalry, but a shared access to the crown's treasures. The personal property signs have seemingly been taken down, and the collection is finally open to all. If the swapping of the lotus flower tiara hinted at a change, the appearance of the aquamarine ribbon tiara confirmed it beyond doubt. This is a piece with a fascinating, slightly mysterious past. It features 5 large aquamarines set in an intricate diamond ribbon design. For decades, it was a bit of a ghost in the royal collection. The late Queen Elizabeth II wore it exactly once in public, during a visit to Canada way back in 1970. After that, it vanished. For years, experts whispered that it had been dismantled to supply stones for the Queen's massive Brazilian aquamarine tiara. But then, in 2012, it reappeared on the head of Sophie, then the Countess of Wessex. Sophie wore it frequently to major European events, weddings in Luxembourg and Sweden, and it effectively became her signature gala piece. We grew used to seeing it on her. It felt settled. But in November 2024, at the diplomatic reception, Queen Camilla walked in wearing it. It was a striking moment. Seeing the Queen Consort wearing a tiara that had been the hallmark of a duchess was a complete reversal of the usual visual hierarchy. Typically, queens stick to the biggest, most historically significant pieces: the girls of Great Britain and Ireland, the Greville honeycomb. By choosing this lighter, junior tiara, Camilla sent a message that the old, rigid structures are gone. The collection is no longer about rank, it's about the right jewel for the right moment. The barriers are down, and the family is sharing the wealth. And then came the moment that truly redefined everything. The ultimate treasure of the royal collection. The Oriental Circlet Tiara. This isn't just a tiara, it is a piece of living history, designed by Prince Albert himself in 1853 for his beloved Victoria. Originally, it was set with thousands of diamonds and opals, Albert's favorite stone. But later, Queen Alexandra, who famously considered opals unlucky, had them replaced with Burmese rubies in 1902. For over a century, this tiara carried immense prestige. Upon her death, Queen Victoria designated it an heirloom of the crown, specifically stating it was to be worn by future queens. And historically, that is exactly what happened. It was a favorite of the Queen Mother, who wore it constantly, even into her widowhood. The late Queen Elizabeth II wore it only once, in Malta. It carries the weight of sovereignty in every ruby arch. So, when the Princess of Wales appeared at the German state banquet in December 2025, wearing the Oriental circlet, it was nothing short of a sensation. I have to admit, I always dreamed of seeing Catherine in this piece, but I imagined it would happen years from now, when she was queen herself. To see it on her now, while she is still the Princess of Wales, was a breathtaking surprise. It signaled a level of trust and status that goes beyond anything we saw in the previous reign. And the timing was impeccable. There was a layer of deep historical awareness in this choice. Remember, this tiara was the brainchild of Prince Albert, a German prince. So it is fitting that Queen Alexandra, the very woman who added those rubies, is believed to have worn this tiara only once, specifically during a state visit to Germany. By selecting this piece for the German state banquet in 2025, the palace was weaving together a century of history. It was a diplomatic tribute to Albert's heritage and a subtle echo of Alexandra's own gesture, a sophisticated wink that only those in the know would catch. Ultimately, this alone is the clearest sign yet that Queen Camilla feels no jealousy over the spotlight. By handing over a tiara of such immense queenly status to the Princess of Wales, she proved that the days of guarding the best jewels for the monarch alone are over. The collection is now a shared legacy, open to whoever can carry it with the right grace. And that truly is the new rule. So, what does this remarkable year of surprises ultimately tell us? It suggests that Queen Camilla is a far more adventurous custodian of the crown jewels than perhaps anyone anticipated. She has quietly dismantled the invisible barriers of rank, proving that a queen can wear a junior tiara with grace, and that the future queen is already worthy of carrying the weight of a queenly heirloom. She has applied an antiquarian's eye to the vaults, rescuing treasures from oblivion, and a pragmatist hand to the heavier pieces, ensuring they actually work for the modern day. This isn't a loss of tradition, it is a renaissance. For decades, the royal collection felt magnificent, but perhaps a little static, like a beautiful museum display under glass. Now, it feels like a living, breathing entity. The dust sheets have been pulled off, and the jewels are finally waking up after a long slumber. Ultimately, Camilla has reminded us of a simple truth. The majesty of these heirlooms doesn't come from sitting in a safe in the dark. It comes from catching the light, sparking conversation, and telling new stories to a new generation. For those of us who love history and beauty, this era of the open museum is a gift to be savored. Now, I turn the conversation over to you. I am truly curious. How do you feel about this shift in philosophy? Do you find this new, fluid rotation exciting? Or do you perhaps miss the stability of the old days, where every royal lady had her own distinct uniform? And since the vault doors seem to be wider open than ever, what sleeping beauty do you hope to see emerge next? Are you waiting for the Tech Crescent tiara? Or perhaps the lost sapphire bandeau of Maria Fyodorovna? Let me know your thoughts and your wish list in the comments below. I love reading your theories. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the royal archives, please do leave a like and subscribe for more stories from the world of history and jewelry. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.